Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to dive into the absolute paradox of Qatar's rise from a barren peninsula to a literal global superpower under the Thani family. Think about Qatar today. You likely recognize them as the high-rolling owners of Paris Saint-Germain, or maybe the hosts of that spectacular 2022 FIFA World Cup, or even just the architects behind Doha's incredibly futuristic gleaming skyline. But it really wasn't always this way. We're looking at a nation that completely defied every geopolitical odds stacked against it. They essentially turned a desolate patch of sand, with no standing army, virtually no fresh water, and not even recognized borders, into a true desert empire.
Okay, so let's kick things off by wrapping our heads around a staggeringly small number. Qatar has a native population of just 300,000 citizens. For a little context, that is roughly the population of a mid-sized American city like Pittsburgh or Cincinnati. But here's the crazy thing, right? This tiny, exclusive group of citizens sits at the absolute center of the global stage, and gaining entry into this club? Virtually impossible. Qatari citizenship is strictly guarded. It's passed down by blood, meaning this really tiny native population operates almost like this exclusive board of directors for an immensely powerful global corporation.
Yet somehow their per capita income reached an astounding $86,000, which absolutely makes them one of the wealthiest populations on Earth. I mean, we are talking about $500 billion in sovereign assets, all managed by a population you could comfortably fit inside just a few major football stadiums. To put that kind of wealth into perspective, that fund owns massive chunks of global real estate. We're talking London landmarks like the Shard and the Harrods department store, major stakes in global airlines, and instantly recognizable international brands. It is just an incomprehensible concentration of capital.
And all of this impossible wealth and influence? Well, it's largely fueled by sitting on roughly 10% of all known natural gas reserves on the planet. This is the North Field. It's a massive geologic jackpot resting just beneath the waters of the Persian Gulf. By pure geographical luck, this tiny peninsula happened to be situated directly over the single largest non-associated natural gas field in the world. It's literally a subterranean ocean of energy that dictates global markets. But as we're going to see, geology alone absolutely doesn't explain their survival. Having that much resource wealth usually makes a small country a massive target, not an independent powerhouse. Their success is actually a product of pure, hyper-calculated strategy.
So let's get into Section 1, Playing the Empires.
The absolutely crucial point here is this recurring survival doctrine established by Sheikh Jassim all the way back in the 1880s. It basically goes like this. A small state cannot win a war against a great power, but it can make itself valuable to one by threatening to side with another. Jassim was an absolute master of this. During the late 19th century, he literally played the Ottoman Empire and the British Empire right against each other just to survive. Seriously, depending on whose warships were sitting in the harbor that day, he might physically hoist the Ottoman flag or just quietly swap it out for the British flag. He never fully committed to either side, constantly leveraging the anxiety of both empires to maintain his own autonomy. He effectively willed a nation into existence through sheer diplomatic leverage and just brilliantly playing the middle.
Moving right along, here is Section 2, Power, Wealth, and Succession.
So the Thanis used these British treaties in 1916 and 1935 not just for protection from outside threats, but to cleverly secure an internal monopoly on weapons and completely guarantee their own succession. They essentially traded commercial access and oil rights for something way more valuable to a ruling family, the ability to settle family disputes on imperial paper. Think about the harsh reality of a desert environment with competing nomadic tribes. In that world, controlling the flow of modern British firearms was the ultimate trump card. If you alone controlled the rifles, and the massive British Empire officially backed your chosen heir, while you completely neutralized any domestic rivals, you effectively controlled the entire country from the inside out.
And you can really see the results of this strategy. Through an unbroken string of internal, completely bloodless palace maneuvers, they ensured the family never lost the throne in 6 generations. Take a moment to really think about these dates. In 1972, a bloodless coup. In 1995, another bloodless overthrow. And then in 2013, a totally peaceful abdication and succession. This is a region where leadership changes historically involved violent revolutions, military uprisings, or messy foreign interventions. Yet the Thanis managed these transitions entirely behind closed doors without ever plunging the country into civil war. 6 generations, 1 throne, and they never lost power. That is an unparalleled feat of internal stability in modern Middle Eastern history, for sure.
Which brings us to Section 3, the big gas gamble.
After literally taking the throne from his own father, who happened to be away vacationing in Geneva, Switzerland at the time, Sheikh Hamad delivered this incredibly somber television address. I mean, imagine the tension of that exact moment. You're seizing control of a nation while the previous ruler is sitting at a Swiss resort, and then you have to step right in front of the camera to calmly consolidate power and take total control of the state's finances. He knew the oil age was slowly ending and the gas age was just beginning. But to actually capitalize on it, he couldn't have internal divisions holding him back. He needed absolute financial control to make the ultimate bet on the country's future.
And that bet was huge. Hamad bet the country's entire future on liquefied natural gas, or LNG. He took on massive, unprecedented debt to build out the infrastructure. And at the time, this was terrifying. Cooling gas to negative 260 degrees Fahrenheit just to turn it into a liquid, building these massive custom ships to transport it across the globe. The technology was incredibly expensive, and the global market, honestly, wasn't entirely proven yet. It was a staggering financial risk for such a small nation, but the gamble paid off spectacularly. Qatar officially became the world's top LNG exporter in 2006, unleashing an absolute fire hose of revenue that forever changed the trajectory of the entire Middle East.
But instead of just banking the cash and sitting quietly, Hamad used this new wealth to literally buy a seat at the global table. He launched the Al Jazeera News Network in 1996 and aggressively bid for the 2022 FIFA World Cup. He realized something crucial. A small state couldn't outgun larger neighbors, but it could definitely out-broadcast them and out-host them. This is the whole concept of soft power acting as a national shield. If the entire globe is tuning into your news network, or millions of fans are flying in for your mega soccer tournament, you become much harder for a rival empire to quietly invade. Qatar was buying admission to the club of countries whose decisions the rest of the world simply had to take seriously.
Now let's jump right into Section 4, Surviving the Blockade.
In 2017, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and Egypt completely isolated Qatar by air, land, and sea, delivering a very intense list of 13 demands. Imagine waking up one morning to find your only land border completely closed off by tanks, your airspace totally restricted, and your supermarket shelves suddenly facing extreme shortages. The demands were heavy. They included shutting down Al Jazeera, closing a Turkish military base, cutting ties with Iran, and paying unspecified reparations. They essentially amounted to a complete surrender of Qatari sovereignty. The blockading states thought the claustrophobia and the immense economic pressure would force the tiny peninsula to fold in a matter of weeks.
But there are some truly striking historical parallels here. Just as his ancestor Jassim stood down the Ottoman Empire back in 1893, a young Emir Tamim completely refused the 2017 demands. He didn't concede a single inch. Instead, he executed a strategic masterclass. He immediately leveraged his nation's immense wealth to inject billions in cash and prop up the currency. He rapidly flew in essential supplies and brought in allied Turkish troops. He successfully secured critical supply lines via Iranian airspace, and really importantly, he relied on the massive U.S. airbase located right on Qatari soil to deter any direct military action. After 3.5 long years, the blockade ended. The small kingdom did what small kingdoms just aren't supposed to do. It won.
And finally, Section 5, the world's living room.
Because they constantly maintained controversial ties and absolutely refused to take sides, Doha successfully transformed into the world's neutral living room. They've brokered seemingly impossible deals, like the 2020 peace agreement between the US and the Taliban. Just picture that bizarre, surreal reality for a second. Senior United States diplomats and Taliban leaders sharing the exact same luxury hotel space in Doha to hammer out an end to a 20-year war. They've also acted as the primary mediator for hostage negotiations and aid deliveries between Israel and Hamas. They deliberately built a country where the world's most committed enemies will agree to sit across a table from each other simply because there's literally nowhere else left on Earth to sit.
And you have to realize the sheer integration of the royal family into the state itself. Think about this in the context of your own life. Imagine if 1 in every 15 people in your entire country belonged to a single ruling family. That is the reality in Qatar. The Al Thanis permeate every single level of government, the military leadership, the massive corporate boards, and the diplomatic corps. The family isn't just ruling the state from the top down. Structurally and demographically, the family is the state. This intense integration makes internal rebellion or outside interference exceptionally difficult. So while the immense gas reserves beneath the peninsula were an incredibly lucky accident of geology, their survival was a purely calculated 150-year masterclass in geopolitical strategy. What you should really take away from this explainer is that wealth alone doesn't guarantee survival, but making yourself absolutely indispensable definitely does. Still, as the global world order constantly shifts and regional tensions continuously boil over, it leaves us with this final, really provocative thought. How long can this extraordinarily small state keep successfully playing the world's greatest empires against each other without losing its balance? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and keep questioning the history behind the headlines.